Hi my friends, my name is Mark. We've all known, heard or studied or seen the Maslow pyramid, right? It's one of my favorite models that describes human dynamics with a social individual, and I've noticed something really interesting. I've noticed that spirituality is actually one of the layers, right? One of the stages of the pyramid that he does not list in there, but it's one of the integral stages. And I'm gonna share it with you. Welcome to the Flying Koi. So we're gonna start with backtracking about Maslow. So he used to be a psychologist. He was a psychologist back in the beginning of the century, and he promoted, he researched and he talked about this theory of motivation. What makes people motivated? And he came up with a hierarchy of needs. He didn't actually come up with a triangle or the pyramid himself. It was businessmen and consultants who did it later, I think in the 80s or in the 90s. But all the ideas stem from his research. So he postulated, his theory basically says that we have certain needs that motivate us to do things. But before we can go on the next step, we have to fill the lower needs. So what are those needs? We have at the bottom physiological needs. That's things like safety, things like having food, having shelter, right? The basic needs. Then we have safety, needs for safety. You need to feel safe. And when you feel safe, then you can kind of lift your head higher and look up at the next adventure you're gonna go on. Look at plowing your field and sowing wheat or rice or whatever it is, right? And then we have the love and belonging, we have self-esteem, we have self-actualization. So when he postulated that you cannot switch the needs, meaning you cannot go between the needs, you have to fill the lowest ones first, it makes sense. If somebody doesn't have where to live, imagine a homeless person, right? Or somebody doesn't have what to eat, like totally hungry, starving. You're not going to be thinking about mathematical equations or painting or beauty out there, right? You're trying to survive. You're literally trying to survive. And same thing with safety. You cannot think about other things and you cannot relax when you have a tiger walking around your house and he's trying to get in. Or maybe you could watch a horror movie like out of the window, but no, please no. So it makes sense that you need to feel these needs. Like you need to have strength to fight, right? You need to know you're gonna survive one day to fight another day, and you need to know you're gonna know that you have the strength to fight, like to fight the tiger. And once you have those needs, I feel, let's say you found you have a rifle and you have ammunition, right? Then you can relax because you can come out as soon as the sun rises up and you can see outside. You can come out and shoot the tiger and go on about your business. So love and belonging, that's why we talk about family and girlfriend or spouse, about kids, about friends, about the community, because we want to feel connected. We want to feel that someone likes us, someone holds us dear, and that we have people that we hold dear and that we want to connect to. That's why people surround themselves with friends, people who are gonna have their back. We surround ourselves with, like we live in communities, in villages, in cities where people sort of think alike and hold the same values or the same laws, so that there's no anarchy, so there's no chaos. That's why people band under the same flag into similar states or countries, because in a way it's birds of the same feather, but on the other side it's ideology. People want to band together to strive for a bigger, brighter future, right? So that's love and belonging. Then you have esteem. That's a curious one. It's not just self-esteem. Esteem really has two aspects to it. There's an inner aspect and there's an outer aspect. The outer aspect is wanting to feel that people around you like you, that they respect you, that they hold you important. that they think that you are an awesome guy or an intelligent dude, right? And when people think, and people actually display the dynamics, the people display the actions that they like you and they hold you important, it gives us more energy to fill in the role. But if we're just filling in the role, if we're just going through, through rehearsed actions, through rehearsed activities, it's not going to be the same. Because deep inside, we know that we're fake. What was that movie? Catch Me If You Can, the book. Even though people thought that he was on the level, that he was a doctor, he was a pilot, he inside knew that he was a fraud. And he was talking about how he felt a deep kind of emptiness inside because he had a very low self-esteem, because he knew that he could not live up to those expectations, even though people didn't have proof that he was a fraud. So the second part of esteem is self-esteem. Its self-esteem is built on the actual feeling of all those previous levels. When you know that you have the food and you can get the food to last a few days or more, you are safe and you have means to assure your safety, whether it's because you have good connections, social connections, right? You have friends, or you have a police department to which you pay taxes, or because you have a rifle at home and you know karate, I know kung fu, right? So when you know that you can actually walk your talk, then you also have the inner self-esteem. So it's not only what people think outside, it's also what you have inside. It's like a pressure within and a pressure without. Then and you can see how all those needs actually flowing one from the other, right? How they all build upon one upon the other. And then the last need is the self-actualization. That's the need. That's the need that Maslow describes, where a person wants to go a step further than his physical reality, his immediate physical reality. Once the person's safety is assured and his food is assured, he wants to see that maybe he can do something to help other people. It's not about himself. We're talking about moving from the egocentristic model to the altruistic model, to doing something for someone else or for society that goes beyond oneself, where you don't benefit directly. Because if the esteem need is filled, you don't care about anymore what people think about you, because they're already thinking higher of you. It's when you want to do something that will help someone without benefiting you more than it already has. So in that regard, Maslow is talking about self-actualization, becoming a better person, right? About transcendence, looking for the beauty, arts, music, perhaps spirituality. And this is where spirituality comes in. So the way Maslow, I have to talk about the times in which Maslow lived. He lived in the late 1800s and in the early and middle 1900s. He published his theory in 1943, and that was the time when the Second World War was raging. It was a few years before it finished. And he lived through the First World War, when the world was in upheaval, when there was a lot of grief and a lot of basically bad things happening. Also, he lived through the period of industrialization, when people were being replaced by machines, kind of like today they're being replaced by AI, right? When people were moving from villages to cities, when education mattered, because the more you knew, the better position you could get, the more knowledge you could have, and the better you knew how to orient yourself and how to get around in this fast changing world, right? It was also the time after imperialism, right? Imperialism was pushed away by industrialization, and people saw, the rulers saw that they didn't need as many slaves, as much what do you call them? As much labor, right? Hand power. And you could use machines, but you need a lot of qualified personnel and people who actually cared about what they did. They need a raise in production paradigm. So, and also it was the world before the electronics, before the mass spread of telephone services and computers, which came in the 50s and after that. So the view of Maslow on spirituality was very, well, he was quite intelligent. I don't want to like dump anything on him, right? But the view of society back then, the view of science back then, of psychology, sociology, or spirituality was more based on Judeo-Christian values, on Christianity, on Judaism, and on Islam. The religions that were in the New World, in Americas, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, those were considered basic religions, archaic religions. So the mysticism and the shamanism and all those other ways of people connecting to nature and to connecting to each other and to the cosmos, to the godliness, to the polytheism, were considered archaic and outlived. Therefore, Maslow's views on religion were based on what he could study and learn and know from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the big three. And in those days, religion was very, how could I say it, dogmatic. So therefore, spirituality was also very close, much more closely tied to religion than it is today. But what is spirituality? Spirituality, the way I will define it for you, because I'm going to try to bring things that I know just in a very plain language, right? So spirituality is the push, the vector, the desire, the force, the basic human need to connect to something beyond ourselves. We have our lives, we have our body, we have our world, whatever we see around us, right? And we want to connect beyond that. We want to connect beyond the physical. So that is spirituality. Spirituality is not religion. Religion is one of the aspects of spirituality. It's one of the tools of spirituality. There are many other tools and aspects. Spirituality is the desire to connect to the beyond, whether it's God and the divine, their pantheon or court that surrounds them, I mean angels, demons, spirits, and so on. It's the desire to connect to something beautiful, to beauty, towards grand, towards infinite, to music, to other people, to nature, to connect and achieve a symphony in a way, to go beyond what we know and to connect to what we do not know, so that we could dive in it and maybe not lose ourselves in it, but connect to that. So some people experience spirituality while traveling, or rather I would say through traveling they achieve some degree of spirituality. Because spirituality, it's not binary, 0 to 1. It's a continuum, right? Traveling, we discover new things. Some people achieve it through research, through sciences, through reading, by knowing new things, by experiencing new things, right? And obviously the higher level of spirituality is those that are metaphysical, where we reach and understand and connect to things that are not physical, that are even beyond understanding, that are experienced, felt, imagined, or I'm at loss of words, maybe you can tell me. Just synchronized, I guess. So we have spirituality here. So spirituality is another layer, another hierarchy of the pyramid of Maslow, the one that he did not talk about. So when Maslow designed the pyramid of needs, he designed the concepts of the pyramid of needs, he focused on the physical aspects of an individual. Again, we live in the times of wars, we live in the times of industrializations, we needed muscles, we needed strength, we needed emotional stability and balance, we needed superhumans to do super exploits, to push the line, right? So this is what he based it on. It makes sense that if you don't have food, you cannot fight. If you don't have safety, you cannot concentrate on physics or astronomy or on work, on managing people. If you don't feel like you belong, the workers will not work as well as when they feel like they're family. And all these concepts are used today in the modern world, in industries, in businesses, in education, right? If people feel loved and belonging and being valued, and they feel self-esteem, inner balance, they'll do a much better output. They'll bring a much better output that without the lower layers. People come up with better and stronger ideas when these are filled. So to Maslow, spirituality was only one of the aspects of actualization. He calls this transcendence. But I noticed that spirituality as we know it today, which is the connection to everything and the desire to go beyond, is actually one of the inner basic needs that we have. Yes, we do need a minimum of physiological safety or other needs. Because, I mean, if you don't have any strength in you, just laying flat because you haven't eaten in a week, you can't even think about safety at this point. You just, right? But spirituality is a desire that goes from the very bottom of our beings to the very top. It transcends all the needs of Maslow. And how it transcends, there comes the interesting thing, the interesting discovery that they made. We've all heard about stories or legends or actual news about people who did exploits, who pushed themselves to the limits when it was not required of them, who did things when in those situations of dire need or in situations of despair. We had politicians who were locked in prison, or politicians or thinkers who were locked in prison, meaning they're devoid of love and belonging. And yet they didn't despair, they didn't collapse around those times, and they came up with new ideas. They came up with new designs. They came up with new philosophies. We know of people who were in situations of no safety. Think about soldiers on the battlefield. But because of the connection to other layers and other things, they went and they held the line. They allowed reinforcements to come up and either achieve the tactical victory or some change in the battlefield, or became heroes. We know of people who have been starving or who did not have any shelter, homeless people, and yet they went and cared about other people when it was not required of them. And Maslow says that part of the self-actualization is thinking about morals. That's when you think about morals. That's when you think about meaning, about human existence. But that means that when you starve and you don't have safety, you would not be thinking about that. He thinks about justice. Maslow talks about justice as justice towards others. When he talks about desire for justice as part of self-actualization, he's not talking about justice towards yourself, that's safety. He's talking about, oh, there are a few pieces of bread on the plate, I should leave the other bread for other people because I'm not as hungry. It's justice towards others, which is basically kindness. That's empathy. That's the switch from selfishness to, what do you call it? Altruism. When you're thinking about spirituality, reaching the beyond, reaching the nature, the world, the cosmos, the connection, being connected to everything else, to all the other living and beyond living things, people can achieve it on any level. So what spirituality does, it helps you jump between the levels. It helps you jump over the levels. And if for some reason one of the levels disappears, spirituality fills it in. Because imagine you're a scientist, you're working on an important project, and then something happens and your country is thrown into a war, you have to run for shelter. You're not going to be thinking about your research. Yes, you'll be hoping that you'll survive so you can continue working on it, but right now your main desire will be to survive, to feed your family, to provide for yourself, and so on. But people who had spirituality, even while fleeing away, they were still working on their projects. It was their life ideas. One of the best examples I have, it's a legend for some, or it's real history for others, King David. So King David, we know he was a deeply spiritual person, right? Definitely had the connection to God in his case. He was reaching out to God, but he did not have physiological needs. Many times he was going hungry and he had to hide in a cave or had to sleep under the open sky because he was being pursued by enemies, by armies, right? He didn't have safety. Again, he was a fugitive. He didn't have love and belonging. Many times it was the closest ones that betrayed him. His own son, his wife was taken away, right? And yet he overcame all these basic needs that Maslow says they have to be filled, and he still had a strong self-esteem even though people hated him, and he worked on self-actualization because he had that connection. He had spirituality. We know of other examples. Well, I spoke about politicians, about poets, about philosophers or thinkers. It's the desire to be connected to something that's bigger and beyond us. Whether it's godliness, people, ideas, it is all part of spirituality, right? So there's another aspect of spirituality that really plays a very important dynamic of the pyramid of needs. People who work on the spirituality, because, well, I have to go back. I drew spirituality as a thin line because really we all have it, whether we're aware of it or not. They say, if we, for a second, we define spirituality as religion, we have people who are deeply atheistic, who suddenly, in a situation of a lot of stress and pressure, developed a desire to pray or to reach out to God, right? They say there's no atheist in the foxhole, right? But we all have that deep desire to reach out, whether it's for beauty or whatever. So it's very thin for some of us, but it still reaches all the way to the top. But for those people who work on it, whether knowingly or unknowingly, whether in their heart, in their mind, or in their soul, those people who work on spreading their wings and giving strength to their wings, their spirituality feels a bigger area. It becomes a layer, a horizontal layer, not just a line. And in those cases, spirituality can feel part of the needs if they're missing or collapsed. You remember, like when you have a scientist who loses his safety or loses the food and he cannot do anything else until that need is filled. Well, you have situations when someone loses something and yet they do not lose the desire to continue on, to put the maximum effort they're able to give. It's because of they have that desire, they have that spirituality feeling, that missing void. But sometimes it's not a missing void. Sometimes you have someone who just doesn't have any safety. Let's go back to that case of the tiger walking around the house. If we're faced with a situation that's hopeless, let's say safety, psychology tells us we collapse. We either fall into depression, we fall into, I'm forgetting the word, they're using psychology. Basically, we blank out, we freeze, we don't know what to do. We just don't know what to do. We cannot come up with ideas about how to resolve it because we're overwhelmed by the fear, by the emotions, by the stress, by the whole situation. Someone who has a connection to the upper levels would be able to think about something and resolve the situation. But according to Maslow, if your safety is wiped out, your whole pyramid collapses down to the level of safety. But if you have spirituality, it opens a bubble for you, which allows those levels to still connect where you are. And let me just take a simple example of connection to God, right? Spirituality with godliness. You know, if you're not, God will come and save you, or the spirits of your ancestors will come and give you courage and save you. Now you have some peace of mind. You have some resource to stand upon, to think your ways out of the situation. And maybe you'll walk around the house and maybe you'll find the rifle and there goes the tiger, right? So spirituality helps us connect between different levels and it helps us feel the missing needs. Someone who has no food remaining, but he's facing a situation of despair, he may not fully despair or may not fully abandon himself to the frustrations and depression because he knows that something will happen to him. He can connect himself within the imaginary world or in a real actual connection, which hopefully I'm going to talk about in other videos, to other realms, to other layers of existence and other beings around himself, and draw on the courage from that to provide him courage right now to overcome that hunger. To know that as long as he is alive, there's still hope. Tant qu'il y a vie, il y a de l'espoir. French proverb. While there's life, there's still hope. That is spirituality. That is grabbing onto something. So, again, what is spirituality? If you're thinking about the modern model of understanding the world, the universe, right? Not the model that they had, not the models they had back in those days. You have cosmology. That's kind of how the universe is organized. God, demons, angels, the lower realms, the upper realms, how it's all connected, right? The structure. You have the great chain of beings, I think it's called. It's how the living beings are organized, maybe from God to the creator, to angels, to lower angels, to demons, to spirits, to humans, right? To what's there? Animals, plants, stones, inorganic life, the great chain, how it's all connected. Aliens are somewhere up there, right? Then you have the cosmic axis connecting all of them and kind of talking about how all these are interconnected. We're living in a huge universe and cosmos where all these beings, even like inorganic life, is connected to the biggest divinity. So if the cosmic axis is the imaginary, I guess, structure, the theoretical structure that describes this connection. Spirituality is the desire, the impetus, right, that we have to reach out and to connect, to follow that cosmic axis, to connect through and through. The one last thing I want to notice is that, again, Maslow pyramid, it's one of my favorite models because it really describes really well the dynamics in society, social dynamics and individual dynamics. It shows where we draw strength, where we draw motivation to achieve higher and higher needs, higher and higher steps. But because it's a physical model, the strength it draws is physical strength. It's energy, it's power, it's motivation, it's things that we can touch or actually feel. Love and esteem, right? It's almost visible. It's things that we can get from within to push outside of us. It's our energy, it's how we get energy in and we power boost outwards to conquer the world. Spirituality is the energy we receive by grabbing onto the world and incorporating it into us, internalizing it. As within, so without. As without, so within. So that's the thought that I had. It's pretty cool, right? So go ahead, keep spreading your wings, keep spreading, gliding through the air. What else can I say? Cheers. Welcome to the Flying Koi.